Morning, Tori.
We can figure it out the answer.
Good morning. Hope you are well. Like I was saying, I'm working on the essays. My goal is to try and do 10 a day. So I am kind of, like I'm not going to grade anything really except those. Everything else wait. So I'm working on. So far, what I try to do is start with the people that didn't do as well in the first part. Hopefully that will help them in the second part. Some that did, some that didn't, and then I'm kind of just grading now, just as they come. I'll take a couple from second hour, a couple from fourth hour, and work on them. And then I've had some really good ones. 39 out of 40 is the highest so far. Okay, it's hard to get perfect, but couple people have come pretty close, so that's good. So yeah, I'll be working on that, and we're going to start section 2 today. Starts on page 35 in your book, and you can kind of see what we're going to cover if you look at that first page. And you have the Articles of Confederation, and then we're going to look at, so if you guys probably remember this, the Articles of Confederation failed, right? We'll look at some of the reasons for that, and they really highlight issues that we face today as well. Okay, so these are arguments that are still being held 200 plus years later. We'll look at the Constitutional Convention, which is an amazing time period where they write the Constitution that we have today, and then the arguments over that new Constitution, right, which you guys are kind of familiar with, and then the basics of the Constitution. We're going to look at the amendments. Okay, we're going to learn all the amendments. I got a worksheet in there for you for 27 points. Those of you that want to earn some points. And then we'll be talking about federalism. Okay, in my regular government class, I do a whole chapter on federalism. I will spend a couple days on federalism with you guys, as it is an important part of our system. And then, of course, things like checks and balances, separation of powers, which are found in the Constitution. Okay. We'll also be looking at some of the Federalist Papers as well. So you will have a time where one of those days where I say, hey, I need you to read these. We're going to discuss them in class the next day. Okay. So that's where we're headed. And so we're going to start with the Articles of Confederation. Okay. So let's just kind of give you a little bit of a timeline here. Do you guys all remember the American Revolution started in 1775? And it would last till 1783, okay? But in 1781, and what is our governing body here? Who is governing the New World? Second Continental Congress, right? And they're the ones that wrote the Declaration, yes? They're the ones that wrote it and signed it, okay? Well, in 1781, they're going to write the Articles of Confederation. So we have a constitution now, okay? And the Articles of Confederation is going to last till 1787. Okay, so it has a life of about 6 years. And that life is a pretty rough life that Constitution has. Okay, it was ratified, this Constitution, by all 13 states. They all agreed to it. Okay, and so what we're going to look at is kind of what that body looked like, and then what most historians focus on with the Articles is its weaknesses, not its strengths, because it really didn't have any. Okay. And so we'll look at these weaknesses, kind of the structure, okay? So this is a confederation, right? It's a confederal system of government. So remember when I drew the boxes, when we talked about that, right? All the powers at the state and local level, and the national government has very little power, right? Remember that? We talked about federal, confederal, and unitary systems, okay? So obviously this is what our confederation federation is going to look like. All right, so the national government is going to be very weak. So it is going to be a unicameral government. One body, one branch. Isn't there a song that we used to sing at Mass?
One bread, one body.
Yeah, one bread, one body. One body, one branch. Okay? And so the body is a legislature. It's a unicameral legislature. Okay? And each state of the 13 states gets one representative. So how many people are in the national government? 13 people. Okay? Now, with any organization, guys, you need somebody in charge. I mean, there's got to be somebody that's in charge, right? And so they're going to pick one of the 13 to be the leader of the legislature. And so the first president of the United States is John Hanson. Have you heard this before? None of you heard this before? You have? There will be several of these men over the 6 years that will be the leader of the national government. Okay? You got to pick one, because what's going to start happening right away is you're going to have groups of states competing against each other within the government. Okay? And then literally between the states where they live, they will be having arguments. Okay? There's no, let me see, I want to make sure I get everything in. So all power is vested in this body. And guys, elections are annual. They don't trust government, people. You understand? So if you go to, where are they going to meet, by the way? Where? Well, under the Second Continental Congress to be in Philadelphia, and then they're going to move this body where? New York. Okay? So if you go to New York and you're not representing your state well, they're going to get rid of you within a year. Okay? They just don't trust government. Okay? And that is a theme here, because they're going to make this government very weak. Okay? So you would say, what kind of system is this? Is this a presidential system or a parliamentary system? Say, it's a parliamentary system, because they're choosing one of their own to lead them. Does that make sense? Okay? It's a parliamentary system with a unicameral government, one branch. Okay? In order to pass anything in this body, just like before, you need 9 of 13. Now, guys, that's not a majority. That's a super majority. So you got to get 9 states to agree on something. That's going to be difficult. Okay? So we can already see some problems with this. Okay? So let's look at the powers they do have and the powers they don't have. Okay? So the powers they do have, this national government can declare war, they can make treaties. Obviously, that's really important. Okay. They can coin money, raise an army, and attempt to settle disputes between states. Okay, we have 16 people in here. Let's pretend like we are 16 states instead of 13 states for a second. Some of you guys have really good ports in your states where ships can come in and you can do lots of commerce. Some of you might be like Pennsylvania, a little more landlocked. Okay? Some of you might be like Virginia and you have the Chesapeake Bay. Okay? Some of you may have some really navigable rivers that you can put large boats on and ship goods and so forth, crops. Some of you have, bumper crops like tobacco or cotton, and others may not. So what you're going to see is in this room, everybody's looking out for their own self-interest, yes? As a state. And so there's going to be division in here. You know what I mean? You guys are going to break up into groups, looking out, you're going to team up against the other groups. And that's what happens under the Articles of Confederation. When you talk about settling disputes, well, let's talk about the weaknesses here, okay? Now, this makes for a good long answer question on a test. And, okay, there's no judicial branch. So when you talk about settling disputes between the states, there's no independent judiciary. Okay, that's the role, really, that one of the roles that our judiciary plays today is it settles disputes between states. Guys, we rely on the Arkansas River. So does Nebraska. Yeah. No, it's not.
It is.
All right, raise your hand if it's Arkansas River. Raise your hand if it's Arkansas River.
I have a question.
Raise your hand if it's Arkansas River. What is wrong with you?
No, I just had to put it.
I say Arkansas River, but I say Arkansas is in the state.
Well, yeah, me too.
If you're in Arkansas, you probably call it Arkansas.
Yeah,
It's what side of the river you're on.
we call it Arkansas. We live in Kansas River.
No, it's Arkansas. But Arkansas.
It's in our state. Where it's in our state, it's Arkansas.
Where is that?
What are you on?
Where's this doing
I'm on the
on
Arkansas train on this one.
Huh?
I'm on the Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Trail.
Arkansas sounds stupid. Okay. It sounds like you never learned how to pronounce the method or the.
Listen, she's in the main office. Go in, go to the right. She's on the right.
Should I go now?
Do you want to miss this?
No.
Okay.
Just do this out.
I mean, because we're doing something really important here, trying to figure out how to say this word. Stop it. Okay, now, the river starts where? In Colorado, right? Runs through Nebraska. Then it comes into Arkansas. Then it goes to Arkansas. Okay, now, if Colorado, or more importantly, Nebraska, steals all the water before it reaches us, and we don't get enough of that water, then we can sue the state of Nebraska for stealing Arkansas water. And who's going to settle that dispute? The judiciary. Okay? But there is nobody to settle the disputes between these states because they're ganging up in groups against each other. Okay? So this judiciary, the fact that we don't have one, is going to lead to great conflict between the states, great arguments. They're also going to have border disputes, like, where the actual border is between states. Okay, and this is going to be a source of consternation. So there's no ability to resolve these. Okay, at least to people's liking. There's no independent voice. There's no executive branch. There's no sword. So these people can make a decision, but can they actually carry it out? The answer is no. There's no enforcement. Okay? There's no federal law enforcement group. No power to tax. So they can, yeah.
Did the individual states have like law enforcement, or did they just have nobody?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. I mean, they would, you would have like local sheriffs and stuff like that. As far as state and like state law enforcement, like state troopers or Bureau of KBI or something, not yet. Now, most states would set up like a Department of Justice. Okay, and that's where you see most of the law enforcement at the national and state levels, the Department of Justice of each state. Those would evolve over time. So most law enforcement was local, as it is today, really. So yeah. So with taxation, guys, when we look at the powers they have, they can coin money, right? But is that money backed by anything? Okay, because remember, Hamilton's going to eventually set up the national bank, right? That comes later. So what we're looking at here is unfounded currencies in these different states as well. So the different states are printing their own money as well. And this is just a mess, okay? And we owe a lot of money. Our national treasury owes a lot of money to the French and to the Spanish during the Revolution. They helped us out, okay? And so, although they can make their own money, the value of it is very questionable, okay? And in order to raise an army, which we still got 2 years left of the Revolution when the Articles is formed, they're going to have to beg the states for money. Okay? They have to ask the states for money. Or beg. Now, in your book, you guys can read the articles if you want. Can you go to page 40? Bless you. Okay, you've all heard of Shays' Rebellion, right? Okay, so I've got some primary sources in here that are pretty good that kind of show the thinking of some of these founding fathers about the Artists' Confederation, what's going on. Now, Shays' Rebellion is like a glaring example of a need for a stronger national government, okay? It's a rebellion. Now, I'll read this to you if you want to follow along, okay? Daniel Shays, probably born in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, sometime around 1747. During the American Revolution, he fought in the battles of Bunker Hill, Ticonderoga, and Saratoga, promoted to captain in 77. Shays resigned from the Continental Army after being criticized for selling a sword that French General Lafayette had awarded him. The guy was broke. So he sold the sword. And you know, they gave him a hard time about that. Afterward, he settled in Pelham, Massachusetts. In 1786 and 87, Shays was one of the leaders of an armed uprising in Massachusetts caused mainly by excessive land taxation, high legal costs, and economic depression following the Revolution. This uprising became known as Shays' Rebellion. The insurgents were mostly poor farmers who were threatened by loss of property and imprisonment for debt. Now, if you can't pay your bills today in 2020, you can't pay your car payment. Do they put you in jail? No, they send the repo man, right? The repo man comes get your car because the bank owns it. You don't. Not until you pay it off. They hold the title. Same thing with your house, your mortgage. You can't pay your mortgage. There's some leeway there, okay? You have some protections, but if you can't pay your mortgage, they're going to foreclose on your house. You're going to have to move out. Okay? They don't put you in jail for that. Now, if you write a bad check, that's fraud. So you're writing a check saying, I'm paying you this money, and you're not. That's fraud. And you can go to jail for that. Okay? Now, first offense, sometimes your bank has coverage, will cover you if you overdraw. Some banks don't. Okay, you need to check on that, keep your balance together, make sure you're not writing bad checks. Okay? But it's crazy to think that that's what they were doing to people. And so they rebelled. Okay, did you have a question? Okay. So continuing here, they demanded protective legislation, the abolition of the Court of Common Pleas, and a radical reduction in taxes. Imagine that, right? That's an American thing, isn't it, by now? It's becoming a trend. In 1786, armed mobs prevented the sitting of the courts of Northampton, Worcester, Great Barrington, and Concord, and Shays, with 800 men, broke up a session of the state Supreme Court in Springfield while attempting to seize the federal arsenal. Remember John Brown, Civil War? In Springfield, Shays and his men were repulsed by state militia in January, of 1787. Rebels fled toward Petersham and were finally defeated. Most of the men were pardoned later in the year. Shays, who was condemned to death, escaped to Vermont and was pardoned a year later. He was pardoned for trying to overthrow the government.
You just did that.
Right. What?
Sorry.
So they're having a hard time putting. You've got going on here, okay? So let's look at some of these letters, these responses that people are thinking, okay, things are not working well here. Okay, so this letter is written from Jefferson to William Stephen Smith, John Adams' son-in-law. Okay, he had a daughter, John Adams, named, they called her Gabby, okay, or Nabby. Actually, they called her Nabby. And so she married this guy, William Stephen Smith, okay. So Jefferson, remember, he's in France. Okay, he's the U.S. ambassador to France. You can go if you need to.
I'll read it later.
And he's worried, right? This guy, William Stephen Smith, is worried about what's happening, okay? And so Jefferson tries to calm him down. He's writing from Paris, okay? He says, what country ever before existed a century and a half without a rebellion? And what country can preserve its liberties if the rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The remedy is to set them right as to facts, pardon and pacify them. What signify a few lives lost in a century or two? The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. The blood of tyrants and patriots is the natural manure which helps trees grow, the tree of liberty to grow. This is kind of radical, isn't it? Do you hear this? Okay. But it's true. And there's so much truth here. Okay. And you're going to hear Jefferson time and time again on this, talking about people need to be able to rebel. Well, he wrote it in the Declaration of Independence. If these governments are putting people in jail for their debts, they're taxing them very high prices. You've got land taxes, and these poor farmers can't make a living. What are they going to do? What's their only recourse? Jefferson's eyes, it's to take up arms and rebel. But the government shouldn't be too dismissive of these people because they have a right to do it. So we must pardon them. As Shay is pardoned and his followers are pardoned, he was condemned to death. Okay, we see this in the United States of America today. This year more than most. Yes? How many protests have we seen in the last 6 months, 7 months, on different sides? Okay? When people go out and block a highway to make a protest, is that illegal? Absolutely, it's illegal. How many of those people are going to jail? Very few. Very few. Okay? So our government, it's an American tradition to protest. It's who we are. It's how we were born. Okay, so we're very forgiving of that. You know what I mean? We allow that. Now, when you start burning and looting and damaging other people's property, then there starts to be a little bit more of a problem, right? And you at some point you have to crack down on it, okay? But quite a bit of that, if you've been paying attention, has been allowed without too much cracking down. Now, the federal government, and if you look at Portland, especially, and Seattle, going back just a couple of months ago, and Portland's kind of a daily thing, okay? Usually it's local police, okay? But the local police are the target of the protests, yes? So it makes it difficult for them to crack down, yes? Without looking like, you know, they are the problem, okay? And then, so you have state police, but they're kind of the target as well. Okay, so local authorities, mayors, sheriffs, okay, these folks have to make a decision whether they're going to crack down or not. And in those two cities, the city councils put pressure on the sheriffs to stand down. And so the looting, the violence continued for weeks, months. President Trump with the federal government said, let's call in the National Guard. Okay, and some governors have the power over their National Guards. Okay, the governor of Kansas, Laura Kelly, can call in the National Guard if there's a major, you know, incident, say a big tornado or something. She can call up the National Guard to go help with that. If we have a major riot or violence like we're seeing in some cities, the governor can call in the National Guard. Okay, now where President Trump got involved in Portland was these rioters were attacking the federal courthouse in Portland. We have a federal courthouse in Wichita. Okay? So when they start attacking the federal government, then the president can get involved. Okay? Now, he's not supposed to use the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, or the Marines on domestic soil, but he can use the National Guard. Okay? We saw this, you guys are probably familiar with Little Rock, Arkansas, with the integration of the school, right? You've learned about that at some point probably, where Eisenhower called in the Arkansas National Guard, okay? Actually, then the governor called in the National Guard, and then Eisenhower and the federal courts removed the National Guard under the governor's control, and Eisenhower sent in the 101st Airborne. Paratroopers. Okay, now they didn't parachute in, but they came in on trucks. So you sometimes you see, and where the people are on this, you know, what people think will drive, you know, these decisions a lot of times. Okay, so in Portland, we're still seeing protests and violence almost on a nightly basis. Okay, Seattle's calmed down. Okay. And then, you know, this is obviously part of the political side of the election and so forth, okay? So let's turn the page. Now, Jefferson is writing to James Madison here, okay? Because Madison is this new guy, okay? We haven't really talked about Madison yet, okay? Madison is a protege of Jefferson. He's from Virginia, okay? Madison is a very bright young man who is really brilliant. And Jefferson noticed him early in the state legislature in Virginia. He said, this young guy has a future in politics, okay? And he would, for sure, okay? He's about 5'5", 5'4". He's a sickly little man, okay? He's kind of a bookish, nerdish guy, Madison. but he's extremely educated, extremely well educated, okay? So, especially when it comes to like the things we've talked about, like Locke and Hobbes and Rousseau, Montesquieu, he's read all the classics, he knows all that stuff, okay? So Madison is worried. He sent a letter to Jefferson. Jefferson responds to Madison. Again, we see Jefferson's not really worried, but he's in France, okay? Jefferson says, I am impatient to learn of your sentiments in the late troubles in the eastern states. So far as yet I have seen, they do not appear to threaten serious consequences. Those states have suffered by stoppage of channels of their commerce, which have not yet found other issues. This must render money scarce and make people uneasy. I hold it that a little rebellion now and again is a good thing, and is necessary in the political world as storms in the physical. Unsuccessful rebellions indeed generally establish encroachments on the rights of people which have produced them. An observation of this truth should render honest Republican governors so mild in their punishments of the rebellions as not to discourage them too much. That's us. It is a medicine necessary for the sound health of government. Okay? So this is, I love this about Jefferson. You know, there's some things I love about Jefferson, there's other things I don't really care so much about. But the most important man in the New World, George Washington, however, who has spent really more than a decade trying to defeat the British and preserve this union, he finally gets to go home. He told his wife, what's her name? Martha. He told his wife back in 1775, I'll be home for Christmas. He didn't tell her which Christmas. It was 8 Christmases later that he came home after the Revolution. Okay? Washington has seen all of his hard work, all of his sacrifice go down the drain. And Washington is concerned. When we talk about education, we start talking about Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. These guys are brilliant, brilliant men. Washington is a soldier. Okay? He's not a brilliant man. He's a smart man. He's a great leader. When you talk about intelligence, I would say above average intelligence, but to read Washington's words to me is pretty cool because you get to read how he wrote. And I would say, average to above average intelligence and look at how he writes. Okay. Now, when I'm reading your papers, I'm looking at how well you write. I'm not trying to be critical. Okay. As a group, high school students in general do not write well. Okay. And I'm not saying I do. Okay. I helped Lily with her essay you guys wrote last year for Ferris, which was similar to your essay that you wrote for me. You remember that one? Okay. We had to find the primary sources and all that. Okay. And I really made Lily angry when I read her introduction, and I said, well, that seems like a high school level writing. She didn't like that too much. Okay. Look, in every group, I don't know how many of you guys have had an English teacher tell you you're a good writer. Raise your hand if you've heard that. Okay. Okay. There's a few. It's a hard thing to do, right? Sorry, I'm going off track here a little bit, but it's a skill that Mr. Long talks about. We talk about this, and he said, yeah. I don't know how many of you guys work for Mr. Long on the newspaper. It's you? Okay, so let's look at Washington's letter, okay? And he's writing to Madison. Okay, they're both Virginians. Let us look to our national character and things beyond the present period. No mourn ever dawned more favorable than our day, and no day was more clouded than the present. Wisdom and good examples are necessary time to recuse the political machine from the impending storm. What's the political machine? In the Articles of Confederation, the government, yes. Virginia now has an opportunity to set the ladder, and has enough of the former, I hope, to take the lead in promoting this great and arduous work. Without some alteration to our political creed, the Articles, the superstructure which have been 7-year raising at the expense of much blood and treasure must fail. We are fast verging to anarchy and confusion explanation point. A letter which I just received from General Knox, who just returned from Massachusetts, is replete with melancholy information of the temper and designs of a considerable part of that people. Among other things, he says, their creed is that the property of the United States has been protected from confiscation of Britain by the joint exertions of all, and therefore ought to be the common property of all. And that he that attempts opposition to his creed is an enemy of equity and justice and ought to be swept from off the face of the earth. Sounds like a communist revolution to me. Again, they are determined to annihilate all debts, public and private, and have agrarian laws, which are easily affected by the means of unfounded paper money, which shall be a tender in all cases whatever. He adds, the number of these people amount in Massachusetts to about 1/5 part of several populous counties, and to them may be collected people from similar sentiments from the states of Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, you know, those independent colonies, so as to constitute a body of 12 or 15,000 desperate and unprincipled men. They're chiefly of the young and active part of the community. Turn the page. How melancholy is the reflection in so short a space we should have made such large strides toward fulfilling the predictions of our transatlantic foes. Because the people in Europe are saying, these guys think they can start a country from scratch and make it work without like a king or, without this history. Leave them to themselves and their governments will soon dissolve. That's what they're thinking in Europe. Will not the wise and good strive hard to avert this evil? Or will their supineness suffer ignorance and the arts of self-interested, designing, disaffected, and desperate characters to involve this rising empire in wretchedness and contempt? What stronger evidence can be given of the want of energy in our governments than these disorders? If there exists not a power to check them, what security has a man of life, liberty, or property? To you, I am sure I need not add aught on this subject. The consequences of a lax or inefficient government are too obvious to be dwelt on. 13 sovereignties pulling against each other, all tugging at the federal head, will soon bring ruin on the whole, whereas a liberal and energetic constitution, well guarded and closely watched to prevent encroachments, might restore us to that degree of respectability and consequence to which we had a fair claim and the brightest prospect of attaining. Washington, the father of our nation, is calling for a new constitution or adjustments to the old constitution. Okay? And Madison is listening. And Madison is preparing for this. So Madison and this guy, Alexander Hamilton. So we talked about Hamilton. His history at all? Probably not much, right? Hamilton, and I know some of you are into Hamilton. The Broadway show is based off of this book, right? Ron Chernow's Hamilton, okay? Now, I could read to you some more from this, but I'm not going to. But they describe in here a meeting between Hamilton and Madison. Now, Hamilton is a bastard child from the Virgin Islands, right? His mother's from there and his father's from Scotland. They have relations, and then he leaves. Okay? Now, it was very obvious at a young age that this was a very brilliant young man. Okay? So he went to work at a young age working for a guy that ran a international shipping company. Now, if you're in the Virgin Islands, what are you shipping? You got sugar down there, right? Sugar plantations. Molasses. Slaves. Okay. So the guy that owns this company that Madison's working for decides to go to Europe. He wants to go to Europe. Now that trip's going to take a while to sail to Europe and back. Spend a little bit of time there. He leaves a 13-year-old Alexander Hamilton in charge of his international shipping company. And when he comes back, not only is the company still being well run, it's more efficient than when he left. So this owner and some other businessmen down there pull together the money, and they're going to send Alexander Hamilton, this young man, to the States to be educated. Okay, so he shows up at Harvard, and he says, I want to be a lawyer. And so he said, well, you'll have to take these classes. You'll live on this and this and years. He's like, no. So he goes to William and Mary, and they tell him the same things. Just give me the books. Just give me the books I need to learn. Gets the books, comes back 6 months later and passes the bar. When the revolution breaks out, he's joining the cause. So he reads a couple books on artillery and becomes an artillery captain in the Continental Army. And right away is noticed by George Washington. And so George Washington will basically make him like his aide-de-camp. So you've got two guys here, Madison, who's a protege of Jefferson, and Hamilton, who's a protege of Washington. So friends in high places. So Hamilton becomes a lawyer. He lives in New York. He's, he's very boisterous. He's cocky. He's brilliant. So they exchange letters and decide to meet in Annapolis, Madison and Hamilton. Okay. And they start working out a plan for a constitutional convention and a plan for a new government. They realize that the Articles of Confederation, it can't be fixed. We need to start over from scratch. Okay? And so Madison drafts his plan of government, which will become known as what? Where is he from? He's from Virginia. What's the name of his plan? Huh? The Virginia Plan. Okay? And he will bring that, okay, to the Constitutional Convention. Okay? And that's where we'll pick up tomorrow, is talking about the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia and Independence Hall. Because they will rename Carpenter's Hall Independence Hall after they sign the Declaration. Very good? Have a great day.